Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So that's what we do on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature, picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels too. Whether you're an adult reading to your inner child or connecting the young readers in your lives with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. Each week, we'll talk to a different children's literature author and discuss their books, their hopes and dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie, KidLit Loving host, inviting you back to another weekly conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Robin Newman. Robin is the author of multiple books for children, including the Wilcox and Griswold mystery series, with titles like The Case of the Bad Apples, The Case of the Poached Egg, and The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake. She's also written picture books that I loved, like Hildie Bitterpickles, Needs Her Sleep, one of my new favorites, Don't Call Me Fuzzybutt, and her newest, Who's Writing This Story? So many good things for us to talk about today, so let's get right to it. Robin, welcome to the KidLit Love podcast. I'm so glad you're here today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Me too. We met not too long ago in real life, right? Not at a Zoom call, but in real life at the Hudson Children's Literature Festival, one of my favorite children's literature events of the year.
Mine too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And when you walk into the space, you kind of, at least I instantly turn left. I always kind of go clockwise and work my way through the room. And you were one of the first couple of tables that were there. And I saw your picture book propped up, Don't Call Me Fuzzybutt. And I thought, I need to know what that book is about. I need to know more about Fuzzybutt. And so I went to your table. We had a short but a really wonderful conversation about books, about writing for kids and finding your path into it. And so I knew I wanted to invite you onto the podcast as soon as I could. And so I'm really excited to chat with you today. Let's start with the good old-fashioned introductions, because I was especially looking at that festival for authors that I didn't know yet. I wanted new authors, I wanted new books, and so I was so excited to meet you. And for listeners who are listening that might not know about your books yet, give us an introduction, a little bit about you, your journey, your books, all the things.
I started off as an attorney, and I was extremely miserable as an attorney. And so I switched over at some point and became a legal editor where I was less miserable. And then around the time that my son was born, I began to freelance as a legal editor. And then ultimately, I switched gears completely and just started writing my own thing. And I was the great thing about being able to work on my own writing is that I could sort of structure it around my son's school day. And I would drop him off at school, and then that gave me basically 8 to 3 o'clock to do my work and to do my writing. And it took me basically 8 years to hold my first book, and that was The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake. And I'm so it is the greatest feeling in the world to hold your first book. And the book actually started out started off as a gift to my niece and nephew, Isabel and Cedric, both of whom had just graduated college, I might add. And so time does fly. But during one Christmas holiday, I happened to glance over at Isabel, and I noticed that she was yawning while she was opening up her presents. And so she was also, I'd like to note, the first grandchild. So of course she was inundated with stuff. And but I came to the realization very early on that all the gifts that we got her were sort of meaningless, and it didn't really have a didn't she didn't really appreciate them. And it's, especially when you have a 2 or 3 year old, it's you really want to give them something that's going to have a longer impression on them. So the following year, I did little books for all of my nieces and nephews. And so for Isabel and Cedric, they got the Double Trouble Banana Split Detective Agency Hunts for the Missing Birthday Cake.
Oh,
And,
I love the
and,
title.
and then that book, after many, many, many years of revisions, that book ultimately became The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake. And
Wow.
so I'm extremely grateful to Isabel for yawning. And but that's really how it all got started. And it just and then ultimately I took around that time too, it was upon my husband's suggestion, I took my first writing class. And I walked into Gotham children's fiction writing class. And as soon as I walked in, I knew I had found my people. It just, I mean, I was absolutely just, this is the right thing for me. And I loved it. I mean, how can you not love it? It's the best job in the world. So, and I was very lucky. I'm extremely fortunate and lucky that my husband has supported my writing habit. And it just certainly as when you're getting started as a writer, you do need that financial and emotional support from your loved ones. And because it's you really have to love it and really want to do it. So and yeah, so that's how I got started, and that's how it came about.
I love it. There are so many authors that I've gotten to meet on this podcast that have a similar story where they did something that they weren't happy with. And then for whatever reason, they decided to make that leap for themselves. And
It's true.
and it worked, and it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And I just love hearing the stories about people who have done that because it shows all of us that we all can do that. We all have that choice to take a different path. And so I just love hearing the backstory. It just makes the books that much more precious to me of that it actually is here.
But it's not an easy path, I mean, along the way, there were tons and tons of rejections. And the good thing about joining the Gotham group, which was fantastic, is that early on, I think during the first session we had, they mentioned the SCBWI, which is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and anyone who is really serious about becoming a children's book author needs to join that organization. I mean, they really are like the union for the KidLit community. They will help you find critique groups. They will help you connect with editors and agents. They will teach you about the business of children's publishing, and it is a business. That's as much as we love doing what we do, you need to focus also on what is sellable, and what is going to be marketable, and that's the reality of it. So
Yeah, and it's so funny that you mentioned Gotham because at least at the day that we're recording this, not the day that it is airing, I have my first class with Gotham this afternoon
oh,
on Zoom. So I'm so excited.
enjoy it. It's a great class. I highly recommend it. I did the one that was in person, and I prefer in person classes. And especially because when you have a group of people and you're getting a critique, so there's always that dynamic. Someone will say something, and then all of a sudden someone will be like, "Oh, wait, since you mentioned that, I think you should also do this." And it's really how you can really I think it's just a much better dynamic for getting critiques. But Gotham was fantastic. I highly recommend the group. So
Well, it makes me look forward to it this afternoon that much more. So, first book, The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake. Thankful to your niece for launching that into the world. What came next? Do
uh,
you keep going in that series, then come the picture books?
uh,
Did the other ones all take 8 years?
uh,
How's the journey
no, the funny thing was, actually, I sold both The Case of the Missing Carrot Cake and Hildie Bitterpickles Needs Her Sleep at the same time. I think that's right. And then and Hildie Bitterpickles was supposed to come out first, but it didn't. The illustrator was a little late. So that got pushed back, and I think that was the second book that came out. And that, like my latest book, Who's Writing the Story, is also a fractured fairy tale. And it's about a witch who gets all these fairy tale characters as neighbors who move in, and they're extremely loud and they keep her up at night. And unfortunately, the witch is not very good at confrontation. And instead of confronting her neighbors, she decides to move out and try to find a new house. But little by little, she realizes that all these new houses are even worse than what she left, and she ends up moving back home. So, yeah.
No, I love it. It's like you're kind of pushing your own boundaries. You've got some books, Case the Missing Carrot Cake, then you have Fractured Fairy Tales, then you have a book like Fuzzybutt. I love that you've got such a nice range of books in your backlist.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like to mix it up a little bit. It just it's interesting. Like the Case of the Missing Carrot Cake, actually, in its earliest drafts, it started off as a picture book, and my very good friend, uh, the picture book writer, and actually, she also does early chapter books too, as well. Sudipta Barden Quallen. I did a critique with her at one of the SCBWI conferences, and she looked me straight in the face and she's like, "Robin, my dear, this is not a picture book." She said, "This is a chapter book." She's like, 6 or 7 chapters, easy peasy, and you're done, and you need to rewrite it. And she was right. It was the best advice I got. Some people would, the problem was the word counts were really high on it, and I just couldn't get it shorter. And that's like a big red flag, saying you're just like, the format's not right. And so that's something you learn, while you're writing, and it's part of that process. Once I started reworking it as a chapter book, the story just flowed so much better. And yeah, so 3 cheers for Sudipta for correcting me.
Just rewrite it. Easy peasy.
Easy, I know, yeah, but it was just one of those things. But you have to be really open to criticism. It just, nobody really likes to hear it, especially when you've been working on something for years. But after a while, if it's not working, then you have to figure out, why isn't it working, if you really want to pursue that particular project. Sometimes you just need to let it go for a little bit, and maybe it'll work out a little better, once you review it with fresh eyes. But sometimes sometimes it's just not the right project. It's just that simple.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
I think, with a lot of things in life, sometimes you can't see that, and it does take someone else to give you nice criticism, or I guess carefully worded criticism to move you in the right direction, which it sounds like she did.
in some ways, like, I would, I don't, I'm at this point, I don't need the niceties. I just need to know why it's not working.
Right.
Like, just, that's really you really don't want to waste like a year or two on a project that, isn't going to sell. It just, and you still, and it's hard to, because you have no idea what will sell. There's no guarantee with any of this stuff. And for a lot of projects, and when you have an editor's interest, they will still make you revise it, before you actually get a contract. And you may not get the contract. That's happened to me a few times too. I've revised projects, and then after, the editor's like, for whatever reason, they've decided that it's not right for them. But sometimes, like, when that happens, like that happened with Don't Call Me Fuzzy Butt. I definitely, I had sparked interest with the book with a couple editors. Originally, the title was Bear Said a Bad Word, and some editors were interested in it, but it just didn't, it got to acquisitions, but for whatever reasons, I can't remember, it didn't fly. And then when I changed the title of the book, I didn't change the text, I just changed the title. I think the book sold like a week after that. So it just,
Yeah.
it's amazing, like, what'll get something done, what won't get it done. You just never know. So, and
Well, as someone who saw that title and went, "Wait, what? Don't call me Fuzzybutt." That was that was a very effective title change because it worked grabbing
Yeah.
my my attention.
Yeah, that was a huge thanks to, I'm a member of the Bank Street Writers Lab, which is a critique group. The group has been around since 1937, actually, and it's had some very famous authors. Ruth Krauss in the past. Ruth Krauss was a member. I forget. I think Sendak may have been a member at some point, but I'm not 100% sure about that one. But the group meets, on the second Tuesday of the month, and we just go through our stories. And Aurel and Aurel, who was a member of the group at the time, she was the one who, I can't pronounce her last name, and I'm going to totally butcher it. So we'll just say, thank you, Aurel, for coming up with the word fuzzy butt, because it was her genius that had that came up with that one in critique, and yeah, and that's how the book sold. So yeah.
So let's talk about that book. I know we have another newer one that we're going to talk about as well, but I loved this one, and so I want to make sure I give it time here because I think it's a book that kids need and adults need too. I think we all need this book. And so I would love for you to talk about Don't Call Me Fuzzy, but how did that idea come to be? And then give readers a little synopsis of it.
Yeah, so I was, my son Noah, at the time, he may have been in second or third grade, and he came home and in this really bad mood and said a whole bunch of things that he really shouldn't have said. And so that's when I started working on a story called Bear Said a Bad Word. And the story is about a bear who needs his 243 and a half days of sleep, to be precise. And he does everything that he can to have perfect silence. And then, unfortunately for him, one of his neighbors happens to be a woodpecker who happens to be a real estate developer. And of course, he's making a lot of noise and keeping the bear up. And ultimately, each one says some things that they shouldn't say to each other, that, of course, this author will never repeat. And that's sort of how the story came about. And I was also very fortunate at the time that I was working on Don't Call Me Fuzzy, but I was also doing a work for hire project for Sesame Street called Breathe, Think, and Do with Elmo. And the books just sort of worked hand in hand with each other. So it was just more learning how to deal with, like, how you handle a problematic situation. And the Breathe, Think, and Do with Elmo book is wonderful because it teaches kids basically to take a moment to breathe, try to think of 3 ways to solve their problems, and to go and try something out. And and of course, if that thing that you try out doesn't work, I'll ultimately try something else out, and so forth. So the book sort of worked hand in hand at the same time. So it was really nice to work on both projects
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. I think there's an entry point for everybody in here. You know, like I said, whether you're an adult or a child, we all have those days. We all have those moments. We want things to go a certain way. They don't. And we might lose our cool a little bit too quickly. Words are said, things are said that we can't take back. And I just think it's such a relatable concept. But I also loved how, in the mix of people talking about what was going on between those two main characters, the name calling actually got a little bit changed, which often does when people talk about the thing, that the thing changes and it gets further from reality. So I just thought there were so many things that kids could relate to, that adults could relate to, and especially, at the end, without giving away a spoiler, if you will, but also, what do you do differently? How could you make that better? It's just a darling book that I think is a good life coach for a lot of us in a lot of different ways.
Certainly in this political season,
Yes.
it definitely seems very timely. So it's just, yeah, and we want our kids to be better than we are. So it's just, yeah, going forward, that's definitely very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So relatable, such a good lesson there. I think I mentioned at the children's festival, I have um 3 teenagers, and I thought, oh, they're gonna don't call me fuzzy, but maybe a Christmas gift or something. Although I have been having a lot of fun just saying Fuzzybutt because it is just fun. It puts a smile on my face.
Well,
Now, let's talk about oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your newest book, which I loved. I loved. And now I'm wishing I was able to get that hard copy when I was there with you so that I could have a book about writing be signed by the author. So I'm gonna have to find you at your next event that we are close enough to attend. But who's writing this story? Just released in May of 2024, so not too long ago. Tell us about this book.
So, I started working on it, I think during the pandemic, and I was really in a bad way. I cannot overemphasize how horribly depressed I was during the whole pandemic. I had put on 20 pounds during that whole process. And it was just a really bad period. And writing for me at that time was really hard. And everything I seemed to write wasn't working. And I think it's important for people to understand like writers have some good days and they have some bad days. And the bad days sometimes can really drag on. And so I was trying to write and it really wasn't working. And then so I went through some of my old stories and I happened to have this fractured fairy tale that I had written a while back, and it had gone to acquisitions, and it was about a writer having problems with her characters, namely the three little pigs and the big bad wolf, and um, and they were upset with her retelling of the story. And I think what changed this time around was like I sort of thought like, well, what is it that's really bothering them? And then I thought like I started thinking about just like the basic concepts of story. What makes up a story? You've got your characters, you've got your setting, you've got conflict, you've got plot, you've got resolution. And I'm like, I wonder if I can sort of introduce those well, as the basis for what they're arguing about and sort of slide that in. And so that, once I started doing that, the story got much more traction. My editor at Creston, the great Marissa Moss, she was very helpful. She had me do a number of revisions on it. And then that's sort of how the story came about. And so it just, but I had worked on this a couple of years ago, and yeah, I think it went to acquisitions at Harper at the time, and I really thought it was going to sell. And that's the hard part. You get really close with some of these projects, and it just doesn't pan out. And I couldn't remember what. I mean, maybe at the time there was a period of time when I think publishing had soured a little bit on Fractured Fairy Tales. And I think the market was just flooded with them, and that's why that may have been one of the reasons why it didn't get picked up. Yeah, so I was really thrilled to see that my editor was, happy to take on the project, and I hope the book in the end will help kids like write their own stories, and realize that they can play around with it. And the great thing about Fractured Fairy Tales is that you you can they provide you a great base for like coming up with your own stories. If you say someone is big and bad, everybody knows who you're talking about, so you don't need a lot of character development. If you say he's huffing and puffing, still know who you're talking about. So it just yeah, so you have a lot of flexibility in terms of and material to start off with. You're not like starting off from scratch when you're writing a story.
I loved this book because it felt so immersive, right? Because you've got the writer who's writing, but then these characters who are talking back, and you can see the back and forth between the writer, between the pigs, and the development of the story that you're learning along the way. It's just a book that I don't know, you just kind of feel drawn to, jumped into, and then kind of maybe midway, a little after midway, the format does this nice change where it looks more like a graphic novel, a comic where, those pigs end up taking over as you mentioned. And so the story and the illustrations and the colors and everything changes too. I just loved it. It really was such an immersive, engaging book. I could see it as a read aloud. I could see it in classrooms. I could also see every single writing teacher needing this as a mentor text, as you mentioned. I just see
I
so
hope that's
many.
the case.
Yeah.
I really hope that's the case. Yeah, no, I love flipping stories, right side up and upside down. That's a, that's what writers do, it's just like you really want to keep your, readers on their toes. When I was in college, at one point, I happened to have been a romance language major, but unfortunately, I started Spanish way too late. But during my junior year abroad, I took a year of Spanish with Borges, Jorge Luis Borges, and he's got this book called Ficciones, and he plays mind games with his readers all the time. And it's just like, and it really left an impression upon me. And it just but that's what you want to do. You want to keep your reader on their toes. You want to make the story exciting. It's just you don't want to, because if it's not exciting, if it's not interesting, why why do it, and why would anybody want to read it? So it just
Yeah. And this one, the format was just so interesting and so engaging. I could see kids leaning in to listen to what happens, but as you said, I could also see them wanting to then write because all the rules were broken and fun things happened, and it seemed like, everybody has a story to tell, not just the so-called writer,
mhm.
but everybody has a story to tell. And so, yes, I'll say it here. I think every writing teacher, if you're listening, every librarian, every classroom teacher, this is a book that could teach those story elements. It is a book that can teach voice and hooks and twists and all of the writing things that we try to teach our kids to help them find their voice on the page. I think this book is a perfect model for. I loved it.
Yeah, I'd also like to shout out a huge kudos to Deborah Zemke, who's she's just brilliant as the illustrator for this book, and I think this was our fourth book together, and she just she's just a genius, and she really. She is very good at catching my errors. She sees things that I don't see, I mean, we've worked together, I mean, as for a long time now, and I love working with her. And she's just brilliant at what she does. I love it when the story does, when it starts to switch, and she does take on that graphic novel kind of feel towards the story. And but that's the genius that she is. There's just there's no
Yeah.
other way to put it.
I
Yeah.
love that because, throughout the whole book, there was the unexpectedness of what was going on in the story and some of the twists, but then the whole book took a twist, and the pictures, the image, the color, the mood, that definitely was reflected on the page. It was gorgeous, and I imagine it must make the process easier if you get to work with that same illustrator over time, because you do get to have that level of collaboration that, might not happen if it is a different illustrator that's assigned, as I'm learning.
Yeah, no, she's very good. Sometimes, like, I won't, um, I'll have too many male characters in a book. I don't. Sometimes I make that mistake. She's like, "Oh, this should you need more female characters. You need to change. There's too many. There are too many pigs in the story. Change it out to a different kind of animal, make it a little more interesting." I mean, she also sees the visual things that I don't see. So like, because I mean, she has to draw them, and so I know for one book, I wanted to use a raccoon, but there was an issue, but the raccoon needed to wear glasses. And so because of, I guess, with the stripes with the raccoon and the markings, she couldn't do it. So it was just one of those things that I hadn't thought about. So she's like, well, why don't you use an opossum instead? So and after I looked up how do you spell opossum, I'm like, "Oh, sure, they're really adorable. Yeah, why not?" And, yeah, I don't have a problem changing it. So it just
It goes back to what you said earlier about, having your groups, having your critiques, having your people. It just makes everything better.
it totally does. It's a team effort. Whenever I talk to kids, I always mention the whole critique process, because that's something I think kids can really help themselves out with, not just with their own writing projects, but anything that they're working on. Like that whole team effort really, if you're working on, a math problem, or yeah, it just Yeah, just anything. I mean, when my son was at elementary school, one of the things I loved about his school is that they used to have like these big like math mornings, and the entire like lower school would get together and they'd have all the kids like having breakfast just working on math problems. And I just love that whole concept. And then of course then they would go through the problems, and they do them by grade, so they have like K to 3 working on stuff. They'd have like, 5 and 6 and so forth. And but you can apply that whole critique process, and teamwork to pretty much anything, obviously, that you're working on.
So, what are you working on now? Can you give us a sneak peek
I,
into
I,
anything?
I can mention a little bit. So it goes back a little bit to my lawyer roots, which I'm very happy about. And there is a lawyer in my next project, and it's a lawyer, and he happens to do a lawyer who happens to be an aunt, and he happens to deal with animal problems that have legal problems. So it's just like it's like it's going to be early chapter graphic, and it's and it's gonna it's 64 pages, early graphic chapter book, and I can't wait to see the first sketches. It's supposed to come out fall 25, and I'm dying for my agent to announce it.
Right, right. Me too now, because that sounds lovely.
So, and yeah, I'm dying to see. Yeah, the aunt is a lawyer, and I'll tell you a little bit more. But yeah, his name is Sawyer. Sorry, her name is Sawyer, the lawyer. And so it just yeah. Originally, like this is yeah. So Deborah Zemke is illustrating this one also, and boy, I'm telling you, it's okay. I figure it's not the end of the world, but it just but uh, yeah, so it's a little ant named Sawyer, and she goes to law school. She's always dreamed about, making the world a better place, and she deals with like all these animals that happen to have legal issues, and it's supposed to be like a primer on what lawyers do for kids, and
So
also to deal with some SEL issues, and in this one, this is where I made my mistake with the raccoon. And Deborah's like, "Oh no, it needs to be a different animal." I'm like, "Okay, sure, change it." And
that'd be awesome.
yeah, I'm like, I don't feel, a strong connection to the raccoon, so please feel free to change it. So
Oh, well, it sounds wonderful. So fall 2025, we'll have to have you back on to talk about
I'd
that
love to, yeah.
around your
So
newest release.
yeah, and
Awesome.
yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's nice to have like a little legal twist and to, pay some homage to my legal education.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it comes back full circle,
it
right?
does come back full circle. Yeah.
So for listeners who want to learn a little bit more about you or they want to find your books, where is the best place to reach you or find you online?
So my website is it's robinnewmanbooks.com. If anyone would like personalized copies of my books, Books of Wonder has all of them. And if you order from Books of Wonder, they also have swag. So I just wanted to mention that they're my neighborhood bookstore, and I love them dearly. And I support my independent bookstores. And I'm just trying to think. And aside from that, the books are everywhere. So please feel free to find them or order them at ask your librarians to order them. And that's about it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to put the website and the links directly to your books in the show notes as well. And now I know if I can't see you, I can just go to Books of Wonder and I can, because I want this, I want your newest, I so want this writing book. I
Oh,
want it for
thank you.
myself and I want it for the teachers that I work with so that they can know that this book is there too. So I'll make sure to put all of that in the links to make it easy for everyone to find.
Oh, super. Thank you so much.
Ah, thank you. Thank you for coming on today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Pleasure. Oh, it's been a lot of fun. Yeah.
And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. And I'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing, and everything in between to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a bookish friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.